All right, welcome to the Norwood Conservation Commission meeting on Wednesday, September 18th. If anyone has a recording device present, please let us know.
I do.
Thank you. We'll have an open roll call now.
Peter Bamber.
Joe DiMaria.
Steve Washburn.
Cheryl Doyle. Chris Capuzio.
Al Getz.
All right, first item on the agenda tonight, notice of intent, order of conditions, Clear Channel Outdoors DEP file number 251-0508, Norwood number N2019-08. Project location is 500 Boston Providence Highway, Norwood, Massachusetts. Al?
I've had a conversation with Josh, the engineer on the site, and he reports that the foundation concrete for the existing device is quite deep and several feet below the surface. And in agreement with our discussion at the last meeting, I told him, and I think he's sitting behind me, I'm not sure who's behind me, but I think he's here. I told him that if he cut off the steel work like a foot below the surface, that would be sufficient. There's no reason to dig a hole 8 feet deep and 4 or 5 feet wide and long to remove 10 concrete slabs that are deeply buried. So that's we provided that choice in our discussion at the last meeting, and I think that's what makes sense. It doesn't make any sense to excavate huge holes to remove these pieces of buried concrete. So you have the order going around to sign.
We actually have the, yeah.
Joe?
Yeah.
I have a question. Since there is such a massive foundation for a significantly smaller sign, are we comfortable with the foundation for the new sign? I mean, it seems like either this was extremely overbuilt or there's some major difference in design.
My question to Josh initially was about the size of the new device. The new foundation is basically a 3-foot diameter pipe that's filled with concrete that goes into the ground about 8 feet. And not being a structural engineer, I can't tell you whether that's adequate or not, but I'm sure that when they start digging, if they find that it's not suitable material to have a foundation in, they'll have to go a little deeper until they get to something suitable. So I think we'll just have to keep an eye on it. I don't think.
I would hope that we have some engineering plan that indicates that there was some investigation of the foundation.
They investigated the soils at my request because I was afraid that there was going to be a lot of peat, but there doesn't appear to be any peat right there where they're going to put the new post. And the new post, I'm calling it a post, but it's a huge post, but is much closer to the parking lot than the old foundation, which was further back next to the wetland. So it could conceivably be that the conditions are that different.
I'm sure that the building department has the engineering drawings for it. Okay.
Did we close the hearing? Or
We
close?
did,
Yes.
yeah. I make a
Mhm.
motion to accept these orders, conditions as written.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye?
Opposed? Show. Is it a pen or a pencil, Joe?
Pencil? You want a pen?
Pen's probably preferred. Thank you, Peter. I have one. Thank you, Joe.
Uh-oh. Hey, give me that.
Nope.
Give me that.
Wrong one. What, too soon?
Let's try this again.
No one said it was easy.
Okay.
Nothing's ever easy.
So Joe, basically, you don't want to be driving north on the highway.
Should I keep the agenda going while this is going on?
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
I only do that at 5 in the morning.
Right. Make sure you go north there before you get on the road.
All right, we'll keep the agenda moving while that's being signed. Next up, we have notice of intent, order of conditions, Norwood Light Department, DEP file number 251-0509. Project location is going to be existing transmission line right-of-way in Norwood, Massachusetts. Al?
And this is for modification to the existing facility to complete the work that was done under the previous project. And the big thing is that in order to get to it, they have to cross the wetlands, so that's what prompted the whole thing, is they have to cross the wetland and put in the swamp mats to get to it.
Swamp
So-
that, I don't know.
So there's really no negative impact here.
I make a motion, we accept the orders of conditions as written.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye?
Opposed? Thank you. All right. Keep it right on moving, right? Next up on the agenda, we have signed certificate of compliance, Norwood Light Department, DEP file number 251-0463. Norwood number N2014-10. Project location is going to be existing transmission line right-of-way, Norwood, Massachusetts.
Okay, and this one is to put a new transformer on an existing pad, so that, again, that's not going to be a big issue.
Yeah, just keep it going.
Second sheet on this.
I'm sorry. what?
Is there a second sheet?
No, just one on that one.
All right, next up, we have our treasurer's report.
I'm not prepared to discuss anything tonight.
Acceptable. Next up on the agenda, we'll have the conservation agent's report. Al?
I've got a couple of things. On Pleasant Street, we had the parking lot repaved next to the river and some riprap on the bank, and I was asked to go take a look at it. One of the questions that was discussed during the project hearings was would the bank get revegetated? And when I was there today, it's you can't see any of the riprap anywhere. It's all covered with new vegetation that has grown up in the spaces between, which we want to have the root mass stabilize the slope. The only negative is that there's some things growing there that shouldn't be, and he will take care of those. He did the planting in the 2 planting beds next to the roadway, which had been obliterated previously, so I think he's made a good effort. And we'll be seeing a request for a certificate of compliance in the near future. Let's see, up at the Polaroid site, you know that Moderna has moved in and they put a fence up around their property, and we are in the process of getting a request for a certificate on that. The fence is installed, but what was missing is they didn't provide us with an as-built plan, so that's why that's not before us tonight. They will get us an as-built plan very shortly. They supplied a picture showing the only issue was the fence has to cross an intermittent stream, and they showed a picture of the fence as it goes across there. It looked pretty good to me. So that's and whether you're keeping up with commercial projects, Moderna is going to take over the other major building on the site that was the automobile training facility, UTI, when they close up, and Moderna is going to start modernizing that building for their needs. So they will have 2 huge buildings up there. And that's a good thing, I guess, for our tax base. And again, that doesn't have much, since most of the future work will be in the building, not in the surrounding land. That's not a bad thing for us. We had previously before us Chris Hirsch from the Ponset Watershed Association discussing whether or not we would support a grant application for removing invasive species on the Peswick Park property, and since we had no opposition from this board, they have gone ahead and submitted the application, and I signed the letter representing the owner, since we are the owner of that property. So that's going forward. I don't know when the decision comes whether we will they will receive the grant or not, but it's in the process. Let's see, on 429 to Ponce Street, Joe Overshow's property, you know, the apartment houses, that condo houses that were not built on the foundations, and the foundations had to be removed. That evidently that property is for sale, and I had 2 prospective buyers talking to me about bidding on purchasing that site. So that sometime soon we will have a request for an extension for the removal of the foundations and starting the project up again. I warned them that the thing that was holding them up was the Board of Appeals denied the reapplication, so they have to file with the Board of Appeals at some point and straighten that out. But if they get an extension from us, it'll be all set for another year. So that's what's going on there. Evidently, Mr. Overshow is not going to build it himself, and the gentleman I spent the most of the time with, he builds houses, and he said, I asked him bluntly, was he planning to purchase the property and be the owner and developer? And he responded in a positive way that he didn't believe in partnerships and taking on somebody else's project. So if he purchases it, he will be the new builder.
Mhm.
And as far as I know, he has a good reputation at this point. So things may progress in a positive manner on that property. And we have, later on the agenda, we have Cheryl going to tell us about 84 Moore Street.
I
You're
need
all
to piggyback though
Yeah.
on his agenda only because it's not on here. On the update, the dog east stations have been put out. There's 5 of them. One on the Ponset, one on Ellis, the other entryway, one on Alavisos. That's 3, right? And one up on by the apple orchard, and then the other one's on the lower part of Indine where it's on the head of the trail. There's one there. Our benches and our picnic table for the Nichols Street, they were pouring the pads to do the install on those. And then the sign at Bade Canoe Launch was removed. It wasn't vandalized. All the paint just came off, and for some reason it had black primer to it. So it's being redone. We have 2 more signs that probably after winter they'll need to be done, but right now they're fine to go through winter.
Yeah, that Bade Canoe sign, I don't think anything has been done to it, repainting or any maintenance on it since it was installed, what is it, 30 years ago? Longer.
Good news, though, that it wasn't vandalized and that it was in fact just exposed primer.
Can,
Just age.
can we dig out the paperwork that deals with that project? My recollection is that there may be some requirement that the people who own the adjacent property may be responsible for some of the maintenance. It's been so long since we did that property that my memory is somewhat fuzzy.
Okay, I've read the material on that, and there's an issue that in the deed and the things that go along with it, there's a statement that if we didn't maintain the property, that they reserved the right to take it back. Okay? It's not up to them to maintain it, it's up to us to maintain it, and if we don't maintain it, they have the right legally to reclaim it and take it back. So fixing the sign and of course the paving of the parking lot there and the reconstruction of that and the fixing of the drainage at the bottom corner near the canoe launch helps us in that direction.
Now, is there anything in that deed or in the paperwork that indicated a walk along the river that went parallel to the river, down near the river?
There isn't anything that says somebody had to build something there. However, when the river was dredged in that area by the Army Corps years back, they piled the dredge material on the bank in that area all the way along, and it makes it very difficult to make a walking path without getting bulldozers in there and grading that dredge spoils. Mosquito Control does the same thing usually when they dredging out channels. They just pile the stuff in mounds along the banks, and now in a couple of projects that I've been involved with Mosquito Control, I've tried to get them to smooth that out a bit so that in the future, if somebody wanted to walk along beside the drainage channel, they could. But that's the process that was used there, and it doesn't really lend itself to anything without expending a lot of energy and
Well, there's low water,
destruction.
there's some areas there, but
Yeah.
it has to be low water.
But isn't there a dike there anyways, one of the only dikes that are built along that area?
It's only, well, okay, upstream of the canoe launch, there's part of a stormwater system, a dike, that was constructed to keep from flooding the River Ridge
Yeah.
development. And of course, that's there also. So if you go to the canoe launch area and you want to walk in either direction, it's not an easy thing to promote. So we haven't done anything there in that regards. Now, when they were redoing the flood map, one of the things that I commented on to the Army Corps was that we had two dikes in town that didn't show on any maps. And one is that dike there, and the other one is across the highway at the Sheridan
The 4 Points?
4 Points property. There's a dike behind there all the way along to keep from flooding the office building. That was done after they had a flood years back, and we had a filing to do that. So those two dikes now appear on the flood map data layer. Whether or not anybody ever does anything about it with it, but it's now there where it wasn't there before.
Well, it's important data.
Yeah, it is. It's good to have it on record that it exists. Okay, that's all I've got today.
All right, so now we'll have the CPC representatives report.
Okay, so the process for the St. Street lot, for lack of a better word, it's 84 Morris Street, and it has to do with the land purchase through DCD, which was all part of that deal. They've already done like the purchase and the sales and all that, and it's going to be ran through CPC to get funding that way. And let me tell you how much it is. It's $337,600, but that's for the purchase, the closing cost. There has to be a conservation restriction put on it because CPC mandates that any land purchases have to have a conservation restriction put on them. So there's 10,000 on that. Then there's money for like the DPW to go through, clean it up. Then Paul Hokliotis talked to a professional design park person to do trails, who has done trails along the riverbank, and that quote actually came in at $29,000. It's actually a good deal for it. It kind of, when you hear it at first, you think it's high, but it isn't, because her firm knows how to design along any water body, and there's two dissections of the water body there. So they'll do all the preliminary work and everything, because then we have to file with DEP. It has to be filed with Conservation to do the trails, and then Army Corps of Engineers. Plus, once the design is done for that, we can use it on other properties. We can pull apart what we want and
Mhm.
use it on any of our other properties, because it's already designed.
Can I ask a question? Just
Yeah.
before what is the language of the conservation restriction? Has that been determined?
There's a meeting on September, whatever, 25th.
25th.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's 7 o'clock at the Willett
Mhm.
room at the Recreation. What it does is, you can't build a building on it.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
Everything is passive, so a walking trail,
Okay.
fishing. You can
Cool.
put a little,
And a little dock.
yeah, a little dock.
To s-
You
Right,
could
I
do
just wanted
canoe
to
launch.
make
No,
sure-
that's why it's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah, and we can add to the restriction,
Mhm.
and then it'll be the company that agreed to keep the restriction, then it's protected.
Mhm.
And then it's much harder to sell a piece of land
Mhm.
that has a conservation restriction on it.
Good.
So it's a good thing. So the next thing is the CPC would like this board to vote in favor of it, and then have a letter drawn up, so it'll go with the warrant article at town meeting on October 7th, because we have a special,
Mhm.
and we're presenting the CPC funding on that. That's our only thing we're presenting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I can't touch this. I have to recuse myself from anything involving the Moore Street property.
This isn't,
This is town property.
this is town property. This
Okay.
isn't Dean's, this is property we're purchasing.
No, I understand. I just was a little worried about some of the.
No,
No,
that's
it-
the other side.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is Saint Street
The
side.
Sancy Trail you can vote on, because you can vote on anything in town that is conservation related. It's just like,
Comfortable enough for me. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
you'll see to the letter, Cheryl.
Yes. Yeah, I'll talk to remind it. But if you guys want to go, hear what the guy has to say, or if you have any questions that you want asked, let me know, because
What day is that?
it's October, September
25th.
25th. But if you have any questions and you can't make it, just shoot me an email, because I have to go to it anyways, being on that part of it.
Okay.
So, and if it looks like it'll be a good thing, and it might be something down the road that we might be interested in protecting a couple of our other big properties,
Mhm.
because we're one of the few towns that do not have conservation
Mhm.
restrictions,
Hmm.
which is crazy. Most towns have conservation restrictions. So it's something to keep on our radar.
Absolutely.
So it's 6 acres. Yay for the inventory.
Right. We'll take it.
Do we have to provide access to pieces of property that's owned by the Quonset Valley Watershed Association?
No, the only thing we have to provide access on that property is MWRA.
Hmm.
They have a sewer line that starts on the property, and it's like, here's the river, here's the property, the Sage Street property, it goes like this,
Goes
goes
under,
up underneath and comes back up on the other side. And you know how you have a sewer vent like you would in your house,
Mhm.
only this one's ground level? They check that on a regular basis. The MWRA checks it on a regular basis, and DPW checks on it, and they have an easement to the property, and this property's in land court. It's
Mhm.
registered there and not the regular registry of deed. So, that is actually registered. And they're gonna get, an engineering group that does land court plans, because we need a plan, because we have to separate it off of the school bus lot, because
Mhm.
right now it's tied to that and it has to be separated.
Okay, what is the Deposit Valley doing about that small lot that they have that straddles the pond, the brook?
That's the Watershed Association's
Yeah.
property.
Yeah,
It was originally, the history of that is rather interesting. When all of that whole area was part of the Bird Mills, David Bird had the idea that in the future he wanted the right to pump water from Hawes Brook into one of the manufacturing facilities. So that's why he purchased that little thing separately and kept it out. Now, whether or not 200 years ago there was a spring there, I don't know. You know, people talk about there was springs on the property, but I've never seen a spring, and I've walked the property several times. But that doesn't mean that 200 years ago there wasn't flowing water coming out of the ground. And this little lot is right next to the Hawes Brook. So the only question I had, and there doesn't appear to be any evidence, but the only question I had is, if he was looking towards the future use of water from there, why isn't there an easement or something in existence to get the water from that little piece of property to any other part of the mill sites, right? And I haven't seen anything like that, and it's always been a question in my mind, but
I see a landlocked piece of property that is owned by the Ponset Valley Watershed Association.
yeah,
And I would suspect that at some point they may want to get access to it. So I'm not sure what their options are for a landlocked piece of property. I mean, do we take the bull by the horns and make sure that if we need to, we can give them rights to cross this property to get to their own property?
Well, they could just give us the property.
Well, they could.
and I suppose, you know, that's something could be negotiated in the
Yeah.
future after we own the rest of it.
Well, I mean, if you
That
put an
they-
easement on it, are we in any way?
There isn't anything that
There
exists.
isn't an easement.
There
The
isn't-
only
there isn't
easement
anything
that
that exists.
exists is the MWRA's
No, no.
easement.
If we put a conservation easement on it, are we then?
You can't, but the thing is you can't purchase the land without the conservation restriction
Right,
on it,
I
because
understand
that's
that.
how CPC funding works.
Right, but at some point, when we put that restriction, do we need to indicate that there is a possible right-of-way required to that property?
We're not gonna open up a Pandora's box.
Okay,
When they did this.
Anything else, Cheryl?
Mm.
All right. Proposal of future agenda items. Does anyone have anything they would like to recommend for our next agenda?
Well, I'd like to follow up on or conclude the conversation that we had about the survey regarding our COMCOM signs around the town, and also what we were going to change, we said we were gonna add some language changes around waterfowl and protections for birds.
That's for the sign at the dam.
Just that,
Yeah.
or were there others?
No, it's
So it's
just for that one.
place.
And then
Because we
John was
discussed-
working on that, but
Right.
obviously, he's not here, so we don't have his update.
Well, that's
yet.
why it's for a proposal for the future agenda,
Right,
because I'm
but-
interested in his
So-
feedback.
So that would, signage at the Ellis Pond Dam, which should go on the next agenda then.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appropriate.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.